This was no mere hunt, it was a whirlwind of pounding hooves, choking dust, and raw desperation. Caught in the frenzy, men tore off their outer garments and hurled themselves into the chaos like specters dancing across a living desert. Horses snapped legs in hidden burrows beneath the prairie grass, throwing their riders into the stampeding madness of a bison herd gone wild. Screams, the crunch of breaking bones, and the relentless thunder of hooves trampling flesh echoed across the plains. William Thomas Hamilton, a young man of Scottish descent, found himself at the very heart of this blood-soaked gamble where every passing moment could be his last. Crushed under the weight of hundreds of hooves that knew no mercy. Hamilton had not been born for this brutal scene. Raised in St. Louis after his family emigrated from Scotland, he had lived in a world of urban civility. Yet the damp air and industrial smog of the growing city proved too harsh for his health. After numerous medical consultations, a single solution emerged: a change of climate. And so, his father made a fateful decision to send his son on an expedition into the wilderness with a fur trading party. That choice would forever alter the young man's destiny. This journey was no leisurely excursion. It was a year-long commitment that would carry them deep into the uncharted wilds of the American West. The party was led by two seasoned veterans, Bill Williams and Perkins, men well known among frontiersmen for their daring and expertise. They were legends of the plains and mountains, straddling the line between civilization and wilderness with fearless confidence. For Hamilton, this marked the beginning of a profound transformation. In this unforgiving land, he would learn the harsh art of survival, how to communicate with native tribes, and how to adapt to a world that spared no weakness. The West didn't teach with words, it taught through hardship and blood-paid lessons. The frontier demanded a special kind of person. Men like Williams and Perkins treated danger as part of daily life and lived by a code of unyielding courage. Though still green, Hamilton, sharp-eyed and determined, stepped into their ranks, knowing his survival depended on how quickly he could learn. To enter this world was not merely to travel, it was to shed an old self. The social rules of St. Louis were cast aside in favor of the unwritten laws of the wild, where instinct, skill, and grit determined who lived to see another sunrise. The coming year would either forge Hamilton into a true mountain man or bury him nameless beneath the cold prairie sky. The expedition left St. Louis in the spring of 1842, with Hamilton as a novice among seasoned adventurers. At first, they traveled with wagons and pack animals standard for the early leg of the journey. Their path took them to Independence, Missouri, the last point of resupply before plunging into untamed lands. There, the party sold off their wagons, the terrain ahead too rugged for wheels, and switched entirely to horses and mules. Around this time, Hamilton shed his city clothes of cotton and wool and donned deerskin garments, not only to survive the elements but to blend in with his mountain companions. The veterans noticed the shift, and one remarked that if Hamilton continued to adapt this swiftly under Williams's mentorship, he'd soon be a true man of the wild. On March 15, 1842, the party left Independence. They parted ways with other hunting groups who were setting off on their own journeys into remote regions. Their pace was brisk. By March 20, they reached Salt Creek and made camp. Shortly after setting up, a herd of bison appeared, moving directly toward them. Williams issued a sharp command: "Drive the stock into the corral." The men sprang into action, forming a protective ring using packs and ropes to shield their horses and mules from the oncoming stampede. Trailing the bison were about 30 Kiowa warriors. Their bodies were painted in vivid colors, a sight that stunned Hamilton, who had only seen Native Americans in the city before. These men were different, wild, fierce, and brimming with danger. It was Hamilton's first encounter with a tribe that had no treaty with the United States. The hunting party quickly formed a triangular barricade with their cargo. Each man armed himself with a flintlock rifle, 2 pistols, a tomahawk, and a hunting knife. 2 members also carried bows, handling them with the precision of native hunters. The Kiowa began to negotiate, demanding a passage fee, with thinly veiled arrogance. Williams, with Hamilton beside him, replied in plain sign talk, a universal communication method on the prairie. He firmly refused, stating that the land belonged to the Pawnee, not the Kiowa. Tensions escalated dangerously close to violence. Yet Williams, drawing on his vast experience, diffused the situation by offering tobacco, a traditional diplomatic gift, to the young Kiowa leader, who wore 2 feathers in his hair. The warriors eventually withdrew, though their eyes smoldered with silent threat. Williams later commented, "No real chief among them, just a band of bold young thieves." That night, the camp stayed on high alert. In the wilderness, the price of carelessness was blood and lost supplies. Fortunately, the night passed without incident. At dawn, the group continued along Salt Creek toward the Platte River. Williams's aim was to find the Cheyenne known for trading high-quality pelts. Near the confluence with Cherry Creek, they made another camp. There, 3 mounted men entered the camp. Introducing themselves as Cheyenne scouts, Williams welcomed them warmly, offering tobacco to one who claimed to be the nephew of Chief White Antelope. This was promising news. The Cheyenne were their primary trading target. Williams announced his intent to visit their main village the next day and invited the young leader to dinner. Hoping to gauge what goods the Cheyenne needed, Hamilton watched closely and realized, as always, Williams's tactful diplomacy created favorable trade conditions. The next morning, before the sun had fully painted the prairie gold, the hunters began packing their gear. Before they could leave, more Cheyenne arrived, having heard news from the scouts who returned the night before. The newcomers were clearly pleased with the expedition's arrival. Familiar with both Williams and Perkins, they had traded many times before under friendly and profitable terms. In particular, Perkins, Williams's partner, was held in high regard, deeply knowledgeable about native customs and character. Renowned for his courage under pressure and adaptability in crisis. By 11 a.m., now escorted by Cheyenne warriors, the trading party reached the main village. Cheyenne leaders personally guided them to a prime location for their camp. Expecting them to stay a few days, a large canvas tent was raised, serving as the central hub for commerce. Their livestock, highly valuable, was entrusted to a Cheyenne leader for safekeeping. A gesture of mutual respect and trust deeply rooted in tribal protocol. Following important tradition, Williams ordered the distribution of various food supplies to Cheyenne women so they could prepare a communal feast. This wasn't just generosity, it was a strategic move. According to local custom, a lavish meal was essential for traders to earn respect and trust. If seen as stingy or overly protective of their goods, traders would only receive poor quality hides or worthless items in return. Both Williams and Perkins could communicate effectively using plain sign talk. But Hamilton showed surprising talent in the symbolic language, an unexpected gift that would soon prove invaluable. Hamilton's talent with sign language did not go unnoticed. Though still young and inexperienced, he had a quick eye and a natural grasp of gesture and nuance. The Cheyenne, known for valuing keen observers, took a liking to him. Within days, Hamilton found himself involved in trade discussions, interpreting alongside Williams and Perkins, an extraordinary opportunity for a newcomer in such a delicate environment. The days that followed were filled with bartering. The Cheyenne brought buffalo hides, beaver pelts, and handcrafted goods, moccasins, robes, and tools. In exchange, they sought iron tools, gunpowder, lead, bright cloth, and beads. Williams managed the negotiations with the calm precision of a veteran, always alert to shifts in mood or in spoken signs. Perkins, meanwhile, handled the logistics, measuring goods, checking supplies, and making sure every exchange remained fair and respected. Hamilton watched it all, absorbing every move, every gesture, every nod of approval or flicker of suspicion. He was learning not just the trade but the people, their expressions, their pride, their stories passed in signs and glances. The West, he realized, wasn't just wild, it was complex. A land of unwritten rules, of dignity wrapped in silence, of power built not only on strength but on understanding. One evening, as dusk settled and the prairie turned to gold and shadow, a Cheyenne elder approached their campfire. He studied Hamilton for a moment, then gestured for him to sit. The old man began to teach him new signs, ones more nuanced, more poetic, words for honor, regret, truth. Hamilton followed slowly, reverently, knowing this was no mere lesson in language but in acceptance. That night, Hamilton lay awake, staring at the stars. A month ago, he had been a pale, sickly city boy. Now, he was learning to listen without words, to read the world without books. The West was shaping him not with comfort, but with clarity, and though danger lurked beyond every horizon, he felt something stir within him, belonging. The following morning, Williams received an invitation to speak with Chief White Antelope himself. It was a rare honor. The party made their way to a circle of hide lodges in the center of the village, where they were greeted with solemn ceremony. Williams presented gifts, tobacco, a knife with an ivory handle, and a small mirror. In return, the The chief offered finely tanned hides and a gesture of goodwill a sacred pipe. The pipe ceremony was no ordinary ritual. It was a pact, a symbol of peace, mutual respect, and spiritual trust. As smoke curled into the sky, Hamilton realized the gravity of what he was witnessing. This was more than trade, it was diplomacy. In a land with no treaties, no borders, and no common tongue, such moments were the fragile threads that held peace together. Over the next few days, the expedition rested, resupplied, and continued trading. Bonds were deepened, laughter returned to the camp. The Cheyenne children played near the traders' tents. Women brought food, roasted meat, corn cakes, dried berries. Hamilton, no longer an outsider, shared meals, stories, and gestures with his hosts. Yet Williams never let his guard drop. He knew the balance was delicate. One wrong word, one misplaced gesture, could spark tension. The wilderness had no courtrooms, only swift consequences. Finally, after a successful week, the party began preparations to leave. The farewell was warm but reserved. The Cheyenne understood that traders came and went with the seasons, as fleeting as the winds over the plains. But Hamilton felt the weight of departure. He had come here a stranger, and was now leaving as something more. Not fully a frontiersman, not yet a native, but change. On the morning of their departure, Chief White Antelope handed Hamilton a parting gift, a small pouch of sacred herbs, used in spiritual ceremonies. The gesture said what no words could. You are seen. You are remembered. As the horses were packed and the trail called once more, Hamilton looked back at the village fading into the prairie mist. The road ahead was still long. Danger still waited in silence. But something in him had shifted. He was no longer running from sickness or soft city life. He was riding towards something uncertain, wild, and real. The West had begun to claim him. Within just a few days, Hamilton had mastered and practiced even complex hand signs with surprising ease, impressing the seasoned traders around him. They joked that, at this rate, he would soon become the best hand-talking white man on the plains. While the tribal elders and key village members gathered inside the large lodge of Old White Antelope, a revered elder, to perform the sacred pipe ceremony, Hamilton and two other members of the expedition, Noble and Dockett, were busy laying out trade goods across wool blankets, black powder, lead bullets, flint, bright glass beads, vermilion dye, rich red and blue wool, thick blankets, knives of all types, and flowered cotton cloth. All were carefully arranged to catch the eye and stir interest. Trade on the plains followed strict rules. Never offered different prices to different natives for the same item of equal quality, regardless of whether the buyer was male or female. To break this rule was to court disaster. Such unfairness would instantly unravel the fragile trust that made trade possible. That evening, the Great Lodge was packed with well-prepared hides, beaver, otter, fox, and prized bison robes. As trade gradually came to a close, the Cheyenne women prepared a generous feast for the group of traders. After the meal, Hamilton was invited by Swiftrunner, the son of a prominent chief, for a walk around the village. The two were close in age and quickly grew fond of each other. Swiftrunner enthusiastically continued teaching Hamilton more sign language, explaining each gesture and facial expression with care. As they strolled past rows of lodges, he introduced Hamilton to each influential figure in the village, not as a visitor, but as my close friend. Hamilton's eyes were soon drawn to a striking young Cheyenne warrior, broad-shouldered, powerfully built, with a prominent nose that matched perfectly the image of the ideal plains warrior Hamilton had always imagined. The man was known as Big Nose, and in later years, Hamilton would come to believe that he had met none other than the legendary Roman Nose. That night, Swiftrunner shared important news. Early the next morning, a large hunting party would set out to track and kill bison to feed the village. He invited Hamilton to join and even offered him a seasoned buffalo hunting horse. Hamilton immediately approached Williams to ask permission to join the hunt. The seasoned leader not only agreed but offered Hamilton his own finest buffalo horse. Still, Hamilton politely declined, having already accepted Swiftrunner's generous offer. The rest of the evening unfolded in an atmosphere of warmth and camaraderie. Hamilton had quickly become well liked by the Cheyenne youth. Handsome, agile, and raised on a sprawling farm near St. Louis, he had grown up among wild game like mink, deer, and raccoons. As a boy, he had tamed a famously unruly Mustang that obeyed no one but him. Years of physical discipline, stickfighting, weightlifting, shooting, climbing had made him tough and athletic. Even in old age, at over 81, Hamilton would write that he still walked straight. His eyes remained sharp, and he had no need for spectacles thanks to a lifetime of physical conditioning. Blank. Underscore, blank. At dawn, the Cheyenne hunting party assembled into a formidable formation, about 50 hunters and 20 women. The women's role was to manage the pack horses and transport meat back to the village. The party departed in silence, gliding across grasslands still cloaked in morning mist. After riding for roughly 10 miles, scouts galloped back to report the sighting of a large bison herd. The hunt leader, an experienced man deeply attuned to the contours of the land, ordered the group to circle around and approach from downwind, preventing the animals from catching their scent. Reaching the ambush site, the hunters dismounted, shedding their outer garments and retaining only loincloths for maximum mobility. Quietly, they led their horses closer to the herd. The group split into two wings, aiming to flank and contain the bison, limiting their escape routes and increasing the chance of success. When the hunters were within a quarter mile, they mounted again and waited for the signal. Then it came. A thunderous, living storm surged toward the herd. Hamilton would later describe the moment as a living masterpiece, like a painting springing to life before the eyes of an artist. Shrill cries pierced the air, and the horses exploded forward like arrows loosed from drawn bows. Every warrior drove his mount toward the bison, each hoping to be the first to bring one down, a tremendous honor retold through the winter. Stirring the hearts of young women, Hamilton reacted instantly, digging his heels into the flanks of his hunting horse. The seasoned steed provided by Swift Runner shot forward like a missile, its hooves pounding the earth in a rhythm that echoed across the plains. A cow bison, sensing pursuit, broke from the herd and galloped at full tilt, her powerful flanks heaving as she ran. Hamilton leaned low, cheek pressed against the horse's hot neck, eyes locked on his quarry. Wind roared past his ears. The rumble of the larger herd faded behind. Now it was just him and the beast, racing across the endless prairie. He drew his rifle from its scabbard, a plain-style .50 caliber. Ideal for mounted hunting. At about 30 meters, Hamilton steadied the weapon, struggling to control the fierce jolt of the saddle. He squeezed the trigger. The sharp crack of the shot echoed, and a puff of dust burst from the bison's shoulder. It staggered a few steps before crashing down, its heavy body dragging through the grass before coming to a halt. Hamilton reined in and turned back to inspect the fallen animal. Swift Runner quickly rode up beside him, eyes alight with joy. He raised his hand in salute, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement of the successful kill. It had been a clean, swift, and honorable shot. Though brief, that moment would become one of Hamilton's most vivid memories from his early years on the wild frontier. All across the plain, other Cheyenne hunters were achieving similar victories. Some used rifles, but many still wielded bows with astonishing precision even while galloping. By midday, the hunt was over. Nearly 30 bison lay scattered across the grasslands. The Cheyenne women immediately set to work skinning the animals and loading the finest cuts of meat onto the pack horses. The return to the village was slow and steady. Children ran out to greet the hunters, followed by elders whose eyes gleamed with pride. Praise rang out across the encampment. The hunt had not only brought sustenance, it had renewed the bonds between families, hunting bands, and the sacred traditions of the tribe. Though an outsider, Hamilton had been allowed full participation in a rite both sacred and essential to prairie life. He was no longer merely an observer, he had become a part of the Cheyenne community, trusted, accepted, and respected. That evening, as flames crackled at the village's central fire, stories of the hunt were retold with excitement and laughter. Swift Runner was praised for his speed and precision, while Hamilton earned admiration for his marksmanship and calm under pressure. As night fell and drums pulsed beneath the stars, Hamilton sat quietly, reflecting on what he had lived through. Few white men had ever experienced something so intimate, so authentic. Within a native village, that day's bison hunt, the pounding hooves, the exhilaration of the chase, the honest warmth of his companions would remain an unforgettable chapter in his extraordinary life. In a final reflection, Hamilton recalled one key moment: racing ahead on horseback, drawing close to another bison, raising his rifle once more. Yet this time, the shot wasn't perfect. As he later admitted, the heavy lead bullet veered slightly and struck the animal behind the kidney. Not in a vital spot. But fortune smiled on him. The force of the impact shattered the bison's spine, bringing it down instantly. Another kill, another lesson, and another memory carved into the long journey of a man being shaped by the frontier. Hamilton spurred his horse forward, quickly closing the distance. He raised his rifle, took careful aim, and pulled the trigger, but according to his own later account, the shot was not perfect. The heavy lead bullet veered off course and struck the bison behind its kidneys rather than hitting a vital spot. However, luck was on his side. The impact was so forceful that it shattered the animal's spine, causing it to collapse instantly. The hunt was over. The Cheyenne hunters, along with the women, worked swiftly to process the meat. The thick hides were expertly removed, and the best cuts of meat were tied onto pack horses for the journey home. As the group returned to the village at a measured pace, they were met by a sea of children running out to greet them, followed by elders offering words of praise and approval. The air was filled with pride and celebration. This was more than just a hunt, it was a communal event that reinforced the tribe's traditions and unity. Though Hamilton was an outsider, he had been welcomed into a sacred and essential part of prairie life. He was no longer just an observer, he had become a participant, trusted and respected by the Cheyenne. That night, as fires flickered in the heart of the village, stories of the hunt were retold with excitement and laughter. Swiftrunner was praised for his speed and precision, while Hamilton earned admiration for his steady nerves and marksmanship under pressure. As darkness enveloped the camp and the beat of drums echoed beneath the stars, Hamilton sat in quiet reflection, deeply aware of one thing: few white men had ever been granted such an intimate, authentic experience within a native tribe. That day's buffalo hunt, the thunder of hooves, the thrill of the chase, the sincere warmth of his Cheyenne companions had become an indelible memory in the long and extraordinary life he would go on to live. Swiftrunner, Hamilton's Cheyenne companion, witnessed the scene and immediately let out a cheer of joy, acknowledging Hamilton's successful kill. Later, after having time to reflect and receiving further instruction, Hamilton came to understand that the most effective shot on a buffalo was aimed just behind the shoulder, where the lungs were located, a vital strike point that brought swift death to any large game in North America. The prairie had now become a chaotic sea of sound and motion. Shouts and gunfire echoed in all directions as the hunt reached its peak. Amid the swirling dust clouds, thunderous hoofbeats, and the panicked bellows of the stampeding buffalo, riderless horses charged wildly through the herd, a clear sign that several hunters had been thrown off in the frenzied melee. Yet the Cheyenne were undeterred. Some men, risking life and limb, ran on foot through the turmoil to recapture their lost mounts. Falls were inevitable, especially with horses galloping at full speed through the dense dust, where hidden prairie dog or badger holes posed a constant danger. Such accidents often resulted in broken arms or legs. Even prairie-raised horses, famed for their stability, faced perils in the harsh, chaotic conditions of a large-scale hunt. Thanks to tight coordination, the hunters eventually herded the buffalo into a contained area about 3/4 of a square mile wide, where the main slaughter took place. Concentrating the kill zone made it easier for the Cheyenne to quickly gather and process the meat needed for the community. Hamilton alone brought down 4 buffalo, an impressive feat for a first-time hunter. His performance earned him high praise from the Cheyenne warriors. Hamilton later admitted that he might have taken even more, but like a child witnessing magic for the first time, he often paused just to admire the Cheyenne archers. With astonishing precision, they loosed their arrows directly behind the shoulder, a single shot that brought a full-grown buffalo crashing to the ground. It was a killing technique, passed down through generations, honed by a people who lived in harmony with nature. When the chase ended and enough buffalo had been slain, the butchering began at once. The Cheyenne worked with remarkable speed and skill. Within just 2 hours, the massive carcasses were skinned, cut, and divided with expert efficiency. Each pack horse was loaded with up to 300 pounds of the finest cuts of meat. Despite the chaos of the hunt, not a single Cheyenne suffered a serious injury. Once everything was prepared, the hunting party began the journey back to the village under the setting western sun. The entire Cheyenne village lined the entry path to welcome their returning hunters. The joyous cries and glowing expressions left no doubt about the success of the expedition. A great feast had already been prepared in anticipation of the bounty. Hamilton, as he later recalled, was hungry as a wolf, a common saying among mountain folk to describe a gnawing hunger. He had not eaten since 5 o'clock that morning. After the hearty meal, the village gathered around the fire to relive the details of the hunt. All listened intently as tales of courage, deadly aim, and memorable feats were recounted. Hamilton's companions from the expedition congratulated him on his fine performance. especially his 4 kills. Even the Cheyenne warriors offered him words of admiration and honor that thrilled Hamilton. In the unforgiving wilderness, a white man who failed in such a critical, communal trial could bring embarrassment not just upon himself but on his entire group. In the days following the hunt, Hamilton's party remained with the Cheyenne, granting him the rare chance to observe their daily life. The Cheyenne were a proud and brave people. Family was the core of their society, and loyalty in marriage was held sacred. Infidelity was punished severely, sometimes even by death or mutilation. Buffalo meat, along with seasonal berries and roots, formed the cornerstone of their diet. Around the village, strips of fresh meat were laid out to dry on wooden racks, releasing a pungent, distinctive smell. The Cheyenne especially valued trade goods such as molasses, sugar, and coffee. They were also widely known for their generous hospitality, especially toward those they respected. Hamilton observed their methods of food preservation firsthand. Thin buffalo meat slices were dried under the sun, a technique later adopted by many Western frontiersmen. He also became acquainted with pemmican, a high-energy food made by pounding dried meat and mixing it with animal fat. Ideal for long journeys. Another prized item was depot, a special rendered buffalo fat considered both a delicacy and a valuable necessity. After a few days of successful trading, Bill Williams decided it was time for the expedition to continue. Final transactions were completed, and enough horses were purchased to transport the stockpile of pelts. Before departing, the Cheyenne chiefs gathered to formally bid farewell, all calling out the traditional Plains greeting, "How?" A group of Cheyenne women approached Hamilton and presented him with half a dozen pairs of moccasins, each pair beautifully beaded. The Cheyenne were famed throughout the region for their skill in beadwork, quill embroidery, and intricate decorative arts. Hamilton would later emphasize that the Cheyenne of 1842 should be remembered apart from the distorted images that emerged during later conflicts. As a token of friendship, Swift Runner, the very man who had ridden beside Hamilton during the hunt, gifted him the horse he had used. Hamilton, deeply touched, named the horse Runner. As the expedition departed the village, with their pack horses heavily laden with trophies, they carried more than just goods. They took with them a wealth of experience and intimate glimpse into the life and people of the vast and untamed prairie. Those early experiences in the West helped shape Hamilton's survival instincts and cultural understanding. His time among the Cheyenne revealed to him a complex, vibrant society deeply intertwined with the rhythms of the buffalo and the wide, open grasslands.